Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really fascinating and, frankly, quite critical stack of sources. They focus on the immediate future of the global financial system. The material suggests we're actually entering what it calls the active phase of a breakdown.
That's right. And our goal here is to really unpack what these sources are claiming, particularly the argument that current centralized solutions, like central bank digital currency or CBDC, well, the claim is they're essentially guaranteed to fail right
Yeah.
now, technologically, mathematically.
Okay, so we need to look at why. What are the supposed vulnerabilities?
Exactly. Things like infrastructure gaps, really complex software issues, and some pretty startling claims about, well, a lack of the right kind of talent in government, all supposedly feeding into this coming financial and maybe societal chaos.
And the sources don't hold back. They give specific timelines for financial trouble, even connecting it to predictions about major societal disclosure events. It's a lot. So let's jump right in. Part one, why the sources say the current system is, well, mathematically doomed.
Yeah, the core argument is pure math. It says the global financial system is basically trapped. Too much currency has been printed, period. It's not just standard inflation we're talking about here. It's described as an impossible situation.
An impossible situation. How so? What's the trap exactly?
Well, the system is built to avoid deflation at all costs, right? Because deflation just tanks asset values, collapses debt. It's catastrophic. But to prevent that, the only tool they have left is printing more currency, faster and faster. The source argues the only thing stopping a total seize up, ATMs dead, cards not working, sheer panic is this constant, desperate injection of new money.
So it's like either let it deflate and crash or keep printing and eventually crash anyway?
Precisely. Both paths lead to destruction, according to this material. It makes the current setup economically unsustainable.
Right. And that fragility is supposedly why there's this big push towards a centralized digital currency, a CBDC. But the source is adamant, absolutely adamant. It says CBDC cannot be rolled out immediately, even if, all the banks failed tomorrow. Politically, okay, maybe they'd feel pressure to do something fast, but the sources, they say that the tech needs 3 more years of engineering time, minimum. How? How do they arrive at that huge gap? 3 years.
It really boils down to two massive technical hurdles: the physical infrastructure and this concept of an immutable identity.
Okay, infrastructure first. What's missing?
Well, in places like North America, the basic plumbing just isn't there for a CBDC. Think about it. Every single ATM, every card reader in every store, all of it would need converting. Physically, logistically, that's not just a software update you push out overnight. It's huge.
A massive hardware overhaul, basically. Okay, and the second point, the identity piece.
Yeah, authenticated invariant ID requirement. This is where the complexity really explodes. For a central digital currency to work the way they apparently want it to, every single user needs an absolutely foolproof digital ID, one that can't be faked, can't be questioned, doesn't glitch, and works perfectly at a global scale. Establishing that kind of system, the source points out massive legal, ethical, and just sheer technical problems nobody's actually solved yet. Not reliably, not at scale.
And the tests we've heard about seem to back that up, don't they? They work okay in a lab, a small test group.
Exactly. Isolated test beds, fine. But the moment you introduce real-world scale, millions of people trying to use it at once, or, real-world problems, network lags, errors, maybe even people actively trying to break it, the source says the systems buckle. They just can't handle the contention. That's where the 3-year estimate for solid engineering comes from.
3 years they apparently don't have. And all this time, the hackers are just waiting. The source mentions 2 kinds of catastrophic threats.
Yeah, 2 distinct types. The first is almost like a digital bomb thrower, the prankster type, they call him. Someone who gets in and just gives everyone on Earth $1 billion.
Which, okay, instantly breaks everything. Hyperinflation, chaos, game over. But the second type, that sounds almost worse. The undetectable hacker.
Right. This is the one who can supposedly slip in, take maybe 1 million, maybe 1 billion, who knows, and then just back out without leaving a single trace.
Yeah.
The money's gone, but the digital books, they still look balanced. No alarm bells.
And the source's assessment of current government cyber talent is pretty bleak. It basically says they'd never catch that second type. It'd be invisible theft.
That's the claim. And we're already seeing, or maybe the sources predict we'll soon see, the early signs of system failure, described as spotty and irregular, ATMs failing here, card processors down there. But one specific prediction really stands out: EBT cards. The source says as the banks handling the back-end processing start to fail, those EBT cards are just going to stop working, period.
Wow, okay, that's That's the direct line from abstract code problems to people not being able to buy food. That's street-level impact. Let's shift then into part two. Dig deeper into these software flaws and the whole issue of, well, who's minding this store?
Right. The source ties a lot of this fragility back to the incredible complexity of the software itself.
Mm.
And it brings up a really technical but apparently crucial point about something called dynamic link libraries, DLLs.
Okay, DLLs, break that down for us. Why are they such a potential weak spot?
Okay, so think of a DLL like a shared tool, maybe a calculation routine written by one team. Let's say, hypothetically, the federal government makes one. Thousands of other programs written by totally different people might rely on that specific DLL to do one particular job, maybe check an ID format, calculate something. The programmer using the DLL just trusts it works. They feed data in, get data out. They usually can't even see the code inside the DLL.
Okay, so it's like a black box you rely on. What makes debugging it so hard when things go wrong?
Well, the problem is, when the team that owns the DLL updates it, maybe they change how it works internally, maybe even fix a bug, but if they don't perfectly communicate that change, or if the change has unforeseen side effects, suddenly thousands of programs relying on it start getting bad data, or they crash. But the code the individual developer wrote still looks perfectly fine. The error isn't in their code, it's hidden inside that external DLL dependency that changed. Untangling that kind of mess across huge systems, it takes elite-level skills, understanding multiple interacting parts.
That sounds incredibly difficult. The source used an analogy, didn't it? Something about a car.
Yeah, a really good one. They talked about a high-tech, software-heavy vehicle they owned. It kept failing, dying randomly, kicking out of gear.
Yeah.
Classic weird software glitches, right? The diagnostic logs all pointed to software bugs. But the actual root cause, it took ages to find. It was physical. Actual visible damage like corrosion or wear on a wiring harness connected to a circuit board.
Ah, so the physical damage was creating electrical signals that looked like software errors.
Yeah. Exactly. Intermittent, confusing signals. You needed someone who understood both the electronics and the software to figure it out. Which brings us back to the talent problem.
Right. And this is where the source material makes some very pointed claims about the government's ability to handle this complexity.
It does. The material critiques government hiring practices, alleging that factors other than top-tier technical skill have been prioritized. We need to be clear, this is the source's claim. They argue this has led to a deficit in the kind of high-level talent needed to build, maintain, and especially debug these incredibly complex, brittle systems. Poor retention is also cited as a major issue.
And they contrast this with what they call the adult approach, something from the 80s.
Yeah, they mentioned working with a telephone company team way back in 1985. This team was planning for convergence, basically, putting computers into phone systems, the very early precursor to smartphones. And they were doing this planning 6 years before the tech seriously rolled out. Crucially, they weren't just designing the devices. They were simultaneously designing the training programs and the diagnostic tools needed to fix them later, planning for the human element, the maintenance, years ahead.
That's foresight. Very different from what the source describes now.
Completely. The source essentially concludes that current efforts, especially around CBDC or major financial system fixes, are rushed. Seriously half-assed was the phrase used, more about looking like they're doing something than building something robust. And because of that, the prediction is spectacular failure. Maybe not even getting much past the launch announcement.
Okay, so let's recap briefly. An impossible financial bind being tackled with possibly inadequate talent on technically unworkable timelines. That sounds like a recipe for chaos, which leads us to part 3, the predicted social fallout. What does this mean for everyday people?
Yeah, the source gets pretty specific and pretty grim here. It predicts the really, really hard phase for most people starts around this July, and it intensifies through the fall, leading into what it calls a brutal winter as all these problems pile up globally.
July, that's
Yeah,
very soon.
yeah.
And the source talks about needing an attitude adjustment.
Right. It urges people listening to change their mindset now, to drop any sense of entitlement. The example given was the "how dare you steal my retirement" attitude.
Yeah.
The source says that kind of thinking just won't work. It's not productive for what's coming, which it predicts isn't a short recession, but a depression lasting maybe 20 years.
20 years, wow. That reframes everything from short-term panic to long-term survival and adaptation. And the source assigns a motive to all this alleged mismanagement.
It does. It claims the ultimate goal of those supposedly in charge is to dramatically reduce the global population and, quote, rule over the remainder. Estimated at maybe 500 or 600 million people.
Okay, that's a huge claim. And this is where they introduce that term, weaponized Munchausen by proxy, WMBP. Before we get into the sources application, can you just quickly remind us what regular Munchausen by proxy is?
Sure. In basic psychological terms, it's a really disturbing form of abuse. A caregiver, often a parent, secretly makes someone else, usually their child, sick, or pretends they're sick. They do it to get attention, sympathy, and control derived from playing the role of the concerned caregiver.
Okay. And the source claims that concept is being weaponized on a societal scale.
That's the argument, yes. The source alleges that strategies are being used to deliberately create widespread fear, anxiety, or even forms of socially induced mental confusion. The goal, according to this material, is to make the population feel dependent, scared, and easier to control by those presenting themselves as the solution to the manufactured crises.
And the source gives examples, which we should state are highly controversial and presented here as the source's claims, not ours.
Correct. The specific examples cited in the material include the assertion that promoting trans is a legit thing, is part of this strategy to induce mental or social confusion. Another example given is pushing the idea of an existential climate crisis, when the source insists the reality is manageable climate damage, not an immediate crisis requiring total societal overhaul. Again, reporting the source's specific, contentious claims here.
Okay. But then the source makes an interesting observation about some very public figures. Fauci, Gates, Olbermann were named, saying they seem worried.
Yeah, the observation is that these figures, and others like them, are starting to look visibly stressed or concerned in public appearances.
And why now, according to the source?
The analysis suggests they operated within a kind of groupthink, assuming their plans were foolproof and mass compliance was inevitable. They didn't expect significant pushback. But now, they're supposedly seeing levels of collective resistance, or maybe just apathy and noncompliance, that they didn't anticipate. It's shaking their confidence, making them realize things might not be as predictable as they thought.
Unexpected resistance.
Mm.
Okay, now for the final really specific prediction, the one tied directly to the peak of the financial chaos, UFOs.
Yes. The source predicts a major disclosure event involving UFOs or non-human intelligence, space aliens, whatever term you want to use. And the timing is key, late summer, specifically late August or early September, right when the financial system is expected to be under maximum strain.
And the source sees this not as genuine disclosure, but as a distraction tactic.
Exactly. The source frames it as the last shot or the last gasp for the powers that be, a way to create a massive, overwhelming distraction, something so big it pulls everyone's attention away from the collapsing financial system. The thinking is they wouldn't play this card unless they were absolutely desperate, because what's the next big distraction after aliens?
Right, it's a one-time shot, potentially. But the source adds another layer, doesn't it, about who these visitors, these aliens, are supposedly interested in.
It does, and this is unique. It claims these visitors aren't looking for presidents or scientists in the conventional sense. They're reportedly seeking out minds that can complement their own understanding, individuals who can help build a kind of shared, common, harmonious reality.
And these individuals are. Exactly.
The source claims they are looking for people our current society often labels as criminally insane, or perhaps people who in other eras might have been seen as prophets. Essentially, minds operating far outside the conventional norms, those deeply immersed in unconventional thought patterns.
People marginalized by our current standards. Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a financial system described as mathematically broken, technical systems too complex for the available talent to manage, according to the source, all leading to a predicted major societal upheaval starting, potentially, very soon this summer, and a call for a fundamental attitude shift to face what might be decades of difficulty.
Right. I mean, the core takeaway from this material is the extreme fragility of our systems, financial, technical, and how easily complexity can outrun competence. It really forces you to think critically about the information you're getting, about who benefits from certain narratives. The ultimate message seems to be that real rebuilding only starts after the current system fully, quote, collapsed out of our faces, when the pretense ends.
A stark outlook. But let's end, as we usually do, with something for you, the listener, to think about, drawn from the source. If this analysis is even partially correct, if the financial breakdown accelerates, and if some kind of major extraterrestrial disclosure event does happen this summer, What does it truly signify that these supposed visitors are specifically seeking out those individuals? Society has often cast aside the ones labeled prophets or criminally insane. What might that suggest about the nature of the reality they operate in or the harmonious reality they seek to build? And what does it say about the perspectives our own society might be blind to?
Something to definitely mull over until next time we dive deep.